Hello and welcome to Making Media Now, the Filmmakers Collaborative podcast. I'm your host, Michael Azevedo. Joining me today is Jessica Earnshaw, an award-winning documentary filmmaker and photojournalist. Jessica joins me to discuss her latest film, Baby Doe, which is currently playing in a limited theatrical release. Baby Doe tells the story of Gail Ritchey, who, 30 years ago, as a young woman from a conservative Christian community in rural Ohio, gave birth alone and left her newborn in the woods. Now a mother of three, her quiet suburban life is shattered when DNA evidence links her to what became known as Geauga's child, and she's arrested for murder, despite saying the baby was stillborn. Facing a life sentence, Gail leans on her family for support as she confronts the weight of societal and religious pressures. Baby Doe cuts through the headlines to uncover the human complexity of Gail's case, examining the intersection of women's health, justice, and the outside forces that continue to shape stories like hers. Here's the trailer.
She was an amazing mom.
Suspect wanted for questioning.
We just want to see if we can talk to you for a couple of minutes. You have any idea what we want to talk to you about?
And it's about a baby.
Yeah. What about?
A baby that was left.
Over 26 years ago, Gail Eastwood Ritchey left her biological child for dead.
How anybody could do something like that?
I did not know I was pregnant. The next thing I knew, I was giving birth, baby in the toilet.
How do you create a life and just discard it?
She could face a maximum sentence of life in prison.
She's not only married the baby's father, they have 3 other children together.
Church-going family, I just don't understand.
Given her religious background, abortion would have been murder.
Gail has been adamant she did not purposely cause this baby's death.
She kept repeating she's sorry, and all I could do is say, I forgive you.
There's a lot of shame in these families, secrets.
They're making her out to be a criminal.
This is not acceptable in society. There has to be a punishment.
I don't care about the evidence as long as I know my mom can come home. That's all that matters.
We've seen letters who are monsters. They're not a monster.
Jessica Earnshaw's first documentary feature was the highly praised Jacinta, a close-up look at a woman grappling with addiction, incarceration, and the attempt to rebuild her life. Baby Doe premiered to great acclaim at the 2026 South by Southwest Festival. Making Media Now, which is available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube, is sponsored by Filmmakers Collaborative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting media makers from across the creative spectrum. From providing fiscal sponsorship to presenting an array of informative and educational programs, Filmmakers Collaborative supports creatives at every step in their journey. To learn more, visit filmmakerscollab.org. And as always, if you're enjoying this podcast, please do give it a like, a share, a follow. Now on to my conversation with Jessica Earnshaw. Jessica Earnshaw, welcome to Making Media Now.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to be speaking with you about Baby Doe, the documentary, a very powerful documentary that you have directed. And before we get into the particulars about that whole experience, I wanted to give you an opportunity to sort of introduce yourself to our listeners, talk a little bit about what your creative path has been so far, and how it all led to your involvement, your directing of Baby Doe.
I started in photojournalism as a photojournalist here in New York and was in that for several years. And I ended up, while I was working as a photojournalist, getting a grant to photograph aging in prison. And so I went up to Maine. I went across the country looking for prisons that would give me full access to following elderly people in prison. And Maine State Prison and Maine Correctional Center were the first to offer that to me. And I spent time in both prisons, and I was just kind of just blown away by the experience, like being in a prison, which is so its own world away from society, and meeting all these people that had all this kind of generational trauma in their backgrounds, and which had, in my mind, had really led to what had happened as far as their crimes. And then while I was in the women's prison up there, I met a mother and daughter incarcerated together, and that ended up becoming my first film, Jacinta. I was doing a photo essay in the prison, but meeting them, I just realized it would be way better in video. And so it was supposed to be a short, and then I became totally obsessed, and it went on for years. And it took about 3 or 4 years to finish, and that film is on Hulu. And then from there, I just kind of continued in filmmaking. I found that it was just, I like working in teams. Although for Jacinta, it was only me there filming, and for just Baby Doe as well, which ended up becoming my second film, although I did have a cinematographer who joined me on that, Emily Thomas. But yeah, then I came across another story in the news about a woman who had been arrested in Ohio for, it was a cold case for 27 years. She was the mother of 3 children, had grandchildren, and she was being arrested for what the police were saying is abandoning her baby or potentially killing her baby.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of what brought me to that point.
Yeah, and I do want to point out, Jacinta, your debut documentary was highly acclaimed, and recommend that people seek that out and give that a look. I'm curious, when you made the move from photojournalism and photography to documentary filmmaking, what in your mind would be the benefit, the extra benefit in terms of storytelling? And I'm curious what you felt, and maybe this is an evolving feeling, or maybe it's not just one answer, what you felt was the role of documentary filmmaking in telling these kinds of stories. Why the documentary format?
I think the thing that really stood out to me, I'd say, when it came to Jacinta and meeting her and her mother, is I had intended to make that was going to be a photo essay originally. And at the time, I had an Instagram account. I still have it, although I haven't posted on it for ages, called Aging in Prison. And I was doing these stories and putting audio under them, kind of like, back in the 2000s, there were like audio slideshows, and right. I just kind of love hearing people's voices on top of images.
Absolutely.
I had interviewed Jacinta and Rosemary together, and the thing that really stood out to me was their dynamic, was the way they were finishing each other's sentences, was the ways that Jacinta would look at her mother and like listen to her, and then and Rosemary would look at Jacinta, and then in the yard, I was photographing and filming at the time, because I was still kind of thinking of this for like kind of a photo video essay in some way. And there were moments I photographed, and then I really wished I had filmed it, because there was a moment in the yard, and there's a little bit of it in Jacinta, where Rosemary is kind of they're like play fighting on the benches out in the yard, and the dynamic of them, just it was so much more telling watching it than it was photography.
Right.
And hearing their voices, it was just what I was feeling that I wanted to do as far as audio over photos.
Yep.
That intention, it just went all the way with film. Yeah, I just think
it's interesting. They're not competing mediums by any means. They're sort of complementary mediums, and each of them can kind of evoke a certain feeling, a certain insight on their own, and yet the value, I would say, of film or video, whatever you're shooting on, is almost that it's in the moment. you're in the room, and I think that that's particularly the case with Baby Doe, just given the level of access that you were provided with, and the way that your camera is very fly on the wall. I mean, you're not intrusive at all. There's nothing flashy about the way the film was put together. So as we shift now to talk about Baby Doe, it's 2019, and a case that has been the cold case in is it Geauga County?
Geauga.
Geauga County in Ohio. The Geauga baby, right, is found, and then an arrest is made, and the arrest is made of Gail Ritchey. How long after that event did you discover this story? And as you said, you were working on, or at least you had been researching another story. I believe that was the Emily Weaver case. Both stories involve women who were in the grip of something, if that's the correct word, that's being described as pregnancy denial and actions they took thereafter. So it's a couple of years, I believe, after the arrest that you decide there's a film there. What happens then? How do you gain this remarkable access to the Ritchie family, to the attorneys, to law enforcement, and to all of these experts that are weighing in on the case?
So that's a great question. As you said, I did come across Emily Weaver's story first. And as soon as I came across it, I reached out to her attorneys and started filming that pretty quickly. And I spent about a year filming that before I met Gail. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time with Emily's mother. I met Emily over Zoom. I went and visited her in the prison. I spent a lot of time with her attorneys, but that case really wasn't it was in the appeal process, but nothing was happening. And also I found by spending so much time with Emily and doing so much research on pregnancy denial, a lot of these women really resemble one another. And these remarkably like good girls who are like trying not to make waves in their families, like really just trying to something happens to them where they get pregnant, and then they feel really concerned about telling anybody in their life with this fear of being rejected.
When you say they resemble each other, where's the resemblance? Is this demographics? Is it personality type? Is it family structure?
Really, I found personality type, at least from Gail and Emily's meeting both of them and spending time interviewing them. But also just from what I understand from some of the other cases I read too, like it's really, I mean, I'd say for both Emily and Gail, they're both very much like pleasers, people pleasers. They're not putting themselves first. They're constantly thinking of others. And I think that's like the thing that I see the thread even today, especially with Gail, like constantly not putting herself first.
Right.
She's not even in the equation. And just so I can talk more about that, but when I started looking for another case to pair with Emily, and I put a Google alert on my phone, just literally like pregnancy denial, all the keywords you could imagine for this. And I came across Gail and her story. And what I found really intriguing about it was that it had been a cold case for 27 years, and now she is a mother. So it's such a difference from Emily, who gets arrested I think she gives birth at 19, she's arrested at 20. And Gail is like 50, in her mid 50s, right, when she's arrested. So there's just I thought they were be very complementary to each other and interesting. So I reached out to her attorney through Emily's attorney. Okay. Emily knew him vaguely, wrote him first, said that she, trusted me, all these things. And then I called Stephen, spoke to him about it, basically was saying, look, like what I'm interested in doing is really having full access to a story, and if he was interested or willing to do that, would he speak to his client, Gail? And he suggested I come to town, meet them in person. And so I spent about 4 hours with Gail and Mark, her husband, in his office, talking all about Emily, what I had learned through that story and how my intentions were bringing awareness to this, because so many people aren't aware of, pregnancy denial. Usually when they're in the headlines, it's very salacious, and that had been Gail's experience. When she walked in that day, she really, I don't think, had any intention of doing this. Like, she was coming in to talk to me because Mark and Stephen were both interested in speaking to me. But after talking to her for a while, and I also said, look, like, obviously no pressure to do this. Like, I want to make sure that this is a collaboration and this is something you want to do. I'm not, it's a big commitment to allow me in your life for so long. And Gail, after hearing so much about Emily, said to me, you know what? If this can help Emily, I will do it.
Okay.
So again, Gail putting someone else,
Yeah, ahead of herself.
Yeah.
So at this point, at the point that you all meet, she has been charged and really is waiting to go to trial. So her defense team is assembled, and they have to figure out what approach they're going to use. And then simultaneous to that, her family has to kind of wrap their heads and hearts around the possibility that their mother, their wife, could be going away to prison for quite some period of time. As that's happening, I'm really curious as to, so you're down there with, how big a crew did you have?
At the very beginning, it was just me. I mean, I have a producer, an editor. Our crews are pretty small, but at a certain point, we brought in a second cinematographer.
Okay. So what I found really fascinating about your films, I mean, so many things, but one of the things I found really fascinating was her defense attorneys almost act as the surrogate for the audience, in the sense that, it feels that you make a very deliberate narrative choice in the beginning to, we're going to keep this is going to be vague for a while.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to learn about this together. That's at least the take I was getting. And, the defense team looks at the facts of the case, that a 22-year-old woman gives birth to a child. There is debate around whether the child was stillborn or alive, abandons that child, goes on to live a life, et cetera, et cetera. They are trying to broker a defense around that. So as the viewers are hearing them interview Gail, simultaneous to law enforcement, et cetera, certain facts come out. The reason I was asking about the crew is I'm wondering how, or if it was even an issue, wherein you and the crew had decided, let's not talk about our thoughts around, guilty, not guilty, not necessarily who done it, because we know, but why'd she do it? What do we think about the validity of the defense, et cetera? Was any of that policing happening either internally or amongst you and the crew?
You mean trying to kind of understand it ourselves and come
Well,
to
exactly, because I would think that if you had come to a conclusion around the type of person Gail was, that could impact your portrayal of not just her, but the case itself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I first met Gail, I was interested in, I wanted to do a story where I did feel something for the person, I wouldn't have gone into it if I felt at the beginning of meeting the person being like, okay, this person, something sketchy about them, or like there was something very genuine about Gail, I thought, in her emotions, regardless of how she could speak about it. I felt like she was holding the world on her shoulders, And so I went in pretty empathetic, I'd say. I think in the process for me, and this is something that I talked to Emily Thomas, our cinematographer, about when we were filming those trial preps, was that, yeah, it was a bit of a head scratcher for both of us watching her not be able to answer questions.
Yeah.
Because she has a memory of the events of giving birth, but she doesn't have any memory on how she felt about it.
Right.
And so that was the thing that was really hard. And yeah, very confused, being like, okay, I can't, like, what's going on here? Like, why is she not able to answer questions? And I think for me, the big aha moment with Gail came in my first interview with her a little later. I didn't want to jump into an interview with her right away because I wanted her to get to know me a little better. And like, I wanted to kind of be able to learn more about the case through the trial preps also. And then when we did do our interview, the first one we did was in the green room that kind of looks like an attic upstairs. And in that interview, I just felt like it was so clear to me that Gail like really had no idea what to do at the time, that she really in some ways wanted someone to save her in a way. Like she's a person who's so unable to ask for help.
Right.
And the thing that really kind of stood out to me is that she didn't like bury this baby. She put it on top of the snow.
Right.
And she kind of hoped, she said that if someone found the baby, which she did think was dead, like I think that's, whether or not the baby was alive or dead, it's really hard to know, I think. However, I do believe that Gail's perception was the baby was dead.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when she left it in the snow, she said she, kind of hoped that if someone found this baby, they would help her also. I think she was really unsure of what to do. And
at the time of that first interview, or at the time of the first meeting, were you aware that the events of 2019, I'm sorry, the events of 1993 was actually the second time that Gail had given birth and abandoned the child? Were you aware of that then?
Yeah, and it's funny because not funny, but it's like this is something that came up with my producer, Holly, in that when I came across this case and I brought it and I was like, this is the one I think I want to do. She was like, I don't think we should touch two babies.
Interesting.
Yeah, just because it's such a harder lift. But at the same time, I really felt that the fact that Gail's as Christian as she is, and like there was just something, and it's a cold case, like there was just something really fascinating about it.
And I will point out that the body of that first baby is never found, so therefore Gail is only charged with the murder. She's actually charged with aggravated murder and murder of the second baby, and there is a distinction in there. I thought the role of the church was fascinating in your film too.
Can I actually just quickly say something about that baby though?
Absolutely, yes.
In the research I did about the baby
Mm-hmm.
and just talking to people about it, Gail admits to this happening before.
Mm-hmm.
When she's asked by the detectives, and she leaves this baby, according to her, outside a medical building in the grass, and there's no record of this baby ever being found. Like the police look for it, no record of a
So this has got to be around 1991 then?
Yeah, no record
so
of it.
No security cameras.
No babies found, no babies reported. There's no news about a dead baby or anything. So, like my personal opinion, this is just a personal opinion. I either think this baby, like she definitely had a memory of where it was, and I do believe Gail that she put it there. However, the baby's not found. So my feeling is this baby either didn't exist, that's maybe less likely, or the baby was alive and found, so I just don't, I'm not, it's hard to know about that baby.
Yeah. Was Mark the father of the first baby also?
That's what Gail says, yes.
Okay, yeah. So I was talking about the church. The role of the church it's fascinating, the linchpin, really, that the role of the church in her life becomes, because as we learn in the film, when she's very young, the church becomes a refuge. It becomes a place other than her home, which is described as being very dictatorial. Her father is very kind of authoritarian, and it's, his way goes no matter what. She goes to the church. She's not only impacted spiritually, but she meets these people, among them Mark, but again, almost immediately, where the messaging around what is sinful and what is not sinful, of course, is brought to the fore in any type of, maybe even particularly in youth church settings. But she and Mark transgress, right? And is that transgression more profound because, oh gosh, me and this other kid from the church youth group are now having sex? That sin has to weigh upon her, one would think, and I don't want to be an amateur psychiatrist here, but her father is constantly telling her that she's not measuring up. And she almost proves him right? By engaging in sinful behavior in the realm of the church. time passes. She's charged with this crime. They leave one church because what I assume was judgmental behavior, and they're welcomed into another church. So it's almost all of the manifestations of what a church experience can be. And you really, I'm going to guess it was deliberate, but you really nailed that.
I mean, it was in some ways not that. I mean, it was deliberate in the sense that we thought it was really important for the film, but we didn't like all that stuff just kind of naturally was presenting itself to us. Like it was
Yeah.
just so like, yeah.
Did you get any insight as to the church members, the church that eventually welcomed her and Mark in, for instance, where they stood on things like birth control, where they stood on things like, women's reproductive health services, et cetera?
I definitely think they are definitely pro-life. I mean, all those things. I
Mhm.
just think that they knew Gail so well and they knew her character and who she was that they're I think as far as their philosophy goes, they would say all the time, it's the sin, not the sinner,
Yeah.
it's where and I think Pastor Royce and Patty, the pastor's wife would say that the most important thing is to love people and to accept them. And the most important thing is for a church to be there for people when these things happen and not to judge them. So I mean, a lot of the people from that church came to our screening in Cleveland when we had our festival screening at Cleveland Film Festival, and they were a lot of them. Some of them came to the court
Hmm.
hearing. They just loved her, and
Hmm.
I they understood this wasn't. Um, and also too, I think even what Patty says about having her own abortion when she was young and keeping it secret for 27 years.
Right,
You
right.
know?
And that's a friend of hers that she makes through the newer church.
Yeah. And just to mention also we played Sidewalk Film Festival in Birmingham last summer,
Okay.
and they had us play in a Unitarian church, like we screened there. And there were quite a few people in the audience who were Christian, who had grown up just like Gail. And it was such an interesting experience because so many of these people understood Gail even better than I think other audiences have.
Yeah.
Because we had people tell us that they could completely understand how she had buried it
Right.
because they didn't see a choice for her either.
Hmm.
Like she didn't have any options as far as they were concerned other than doing that.
Hmm.
It just shows you like how much that factored into her decision, just the amount of shame, which I think you also see in the film in some of those trial preps.
Given that you were filming during the process of trial preparation, did you find yourself having to kind of check yourself in the sense around, am I being manipulated at all? Is any of the presentation in any conversations that you were having being had in a way that was mindful of the fact that we haven't gone to trial yet? Therefore, this filmmaker may be my advocate in portraying either me being Gail, or the case in a particular light. Or was that even an issue for you?
I don't think that was an issue. I mean, we filmed everything.
Yeah.
Like tons of trial preps, like every moment with her at home, like moments with the attorneys. And my deal with the attorneys was that they would give me full access, and at the end, um before we locked picture, I would show them the film to make sure there was anything in those the confidential, attorney-client privilege moments that was not, I didn't want anything to be like damaging as
Right.
far as her, the legal defense went. But they didn't have any notes at all on it. But they were very like, I mean, you saw in one of the moments where Stephen's co-counsel Mark is like, what the hell is going on here? Like just super blunt, like, I
Yeah.
don't, you know what I mean? So I think I think when you film that much and you're such a small crew, sometimes just it was just me or just Emily, it's kind of you're able to kind of disappear, become part of the fabric of it, you know?
One of the things that I thought really lent credence to your film and really just speaks to, I think, the fairness and the humanity of your film too is, um, you don't paint the defense attorneys as these saviors riding in, with wearing a cape on a white horse, nor do you paint the prosecutors as just being ghouls looking to, get a scalp, so to speak. And one of the more profound quotes that came from Nick Burling, who's an assistant prosecutor in the film. He says, "I can certainly understand a woman who is isolated and young and unmarried and without support, how she would be scared of giving birth and having a child. At the same time, that doesn't excuse what she did. And he believed there has to be a punishment. This is not acceptable in society." And there's a certain element in your film where that becomes the crux of the issue, wherein, the justice system meters out a one-size-fits-all approach oftentimes to certain crimes. So I just wanted to point that out and ask you, how important did you feel it was to be able to present essentially, what the perspective from both the defense and the prosecution was?
Oh, I thought it was like really, really important because I really didn't want this film to come across like it was just an advocacy film for Gail, because then nobody would believe anything. They would be able to trust me as a filmmaker. So it was really important to present both sides as equally as I could, as far as like, obviously I'm filming almost entirely Gail and her team, but having that, we needed to hear from the other side, and we needed to see the key moments of the trial to really understand, kind of more balanced way, like where we ended up at the end.
So on the issue of pregnancy denial, how is it considered, or what is it considered? In other words, is it a syndrome? Is it a seemingly an allowable defense in any case? Is it recognized by, say, the American Psychiatric Society, like as a real condition?
Yeah, so there's a different ways that the experts, so they call it pregnancy denial. They also call it unperceived pregnancy. And it is not, I think one of the issues here is, and this is something I hope can change, is that it's not in the DSM, which is the
diagnostic
manual.
Manual. I forget what the S stands for.
Yeah, as like a recognized syndrome that they would look at in court. But the reverse is, so if a woman thinks she has a baby in her,
like a hysterical pregnancy.
Yeah, that is in the DSM. But having a baby in her stomach, but not thinking it's a pregnancy is not. It really comes down to the judge whether or not they're going to let the psychology into the courtroom.
Right.
And sometimes they do. And so it's not like it's not considered a defense. It just really comes down to the judge, whether they'll allow it. Because they do, and in the film we talk about this, in this case, they saw it as like an argument for diminished capacity, which would be like if you were drinking and driving, you'd had a choice to drink the alcohol, and you can't then say the alcohol contributed to the accident. So they see that in this way. But I think when it comes to pregnancy denial, you could see it as like a medical condition, like having cancer or a tumor on your side and not wanting to deal with it because it's so scary. I'm just going to pretend like this isn't happening.
Right.
And so, yeah. And also, too, I will say that in 29 countries around the world, there are infanticide laws, which this would fall under. Right. And they see it as a mental health issue. And women won't get more than 5 years in most places. So it's in the States, we don't have any umbrella like that. And so it is really just seen as murder. And that's why the psychology is sometimes not brought in.
Right. And I don't want to give any spoilers, for when folks do have the opportunity to see the film. Let them go in, aside from hearing what we're talking about already, let them go in and experience it for themselves, which is interesting because anybody listening to our conversation right now can immediately Google, Gail Ritchey and know exactly the status, which again, I think actually it doesn't diminish from the import of your film, because the import of your film truly, as I said earlier, isn't a whodunit, but a why. What were the contributions? What were the impacts societally, what was the impacts of her psychology on it. I know your film was released and played during South by Southwest this past spring to great acclaim. You've got a limited theatrical release in New York, LA, and San Francisco coming up over the next few months. You and I spoke about a possible streaming availability in the fall. And I know you've got also an impact campaign that is paired with the film. I'm curious, what has, as you've talked about this film ad nauseum, I'm sure, how have you felt? What have you discovered is the most sort of useful way, the most beneficial way to talk about this film? An advocacy campaign, an impact campaign, usually is structured in the sense that, well, here's a film about a thing, and we think people should know about this thing because it's going to help some folks. So how does all of that play into your ideal around how the film could be presented and perceived?
I mean, I think the film, it's really like a journey. You go on a journey with Gail and her family, and you really like, not only do you go on a journey with them in the incarceration system or the criminal justice system, but you also, it's really to educate on something that I haven't seen any documentaries really about this that look and try to look at how this could happen. But we see these cases all the time in the media. Like, I mean, now that I've worked on this, I am seeing them all the time, and people who see them send them to me, so, and they're always very salacious, woman gives birth in a toilet, dumps her baby in a trash can, like, and you're just like, you can't help but think, oh my God, what a monster, like, but without any of the understanding of how this happens and how we're complicit in it as a society. I think, these girls, I think that the reason I wanted to make this film is thinking, when I first came across Emily's story, just thinking about myself at 17, 18 years old, because these cases often happen between 16 and 21, being that age myself back however long ago. I mean, I can't imagine being pregnant and having nobody to tell.
Right.
Like, I think that to me is heartbreaking. And I think also, a lot of these girls are giving birth in their parents' homes and quietly in the bathroom,
Right.
and I think it's on us as a society to understand that this can happen. It's been happening for decades. I think one of the big cases, and sorry, this is such a long question or answer to your question, but
That's quite all right.
one of the big cases that had happened in the 90s was Melissa Drexler in New Jersey. She was the prom mom. Prior to that, a lot of these cases have been happening.
This was the woman who actually gave birth at the prom.
At the prom, yeah. I think she was 97. In 97. And she's like, what, 17 at the time? And there was a media circus around her. They were saying that she had given birth in the toilet and then gone out and requested AC/DC to dance to. Like, I doubt very much that happened. But those were the headlines. And like before that, a lot of these cases, they were still happening, but they were dealt with behind closed doors. I don't think there was a lot of prison time, and they were dealt with in a way more like civilized manner, taking into account that these are young girls and, the mental health factors. And since then, we've really had media circuses around these crimes. So for me, the most important thing to me is just bringing awareness, understanding that, like, I personally think that this is driven by our society and the way that we, girls feel shame around pregnancy. There are less ways to deal with a pregnancy now if you do get pregnant. I've spoken to our expert in the film who says that she's had so many more of these cases since Roe v. Wade, the abolishment of Roe v. Wade. And so I just think, in our impact campaign, we are trying to share the film with law schools. We played NYU Law a few months ago. We played at the American College of Law, and the response from students was really eye-opening. First, they hadn't actually watched somebody go through necessarily behind the scenes in the criminal process, but also like understanding that there's so much that goes into this.
Right.
And just the psychology that will allow a woman to be in denial of her pregnancy, but also not necessarily show, because I think that's a big thing. People are like, how could you not know you're pregnant? Well, if you are denying that to yourself, it is wild, but it's true that these women aren't really showing. They're still kind of spotting. There's a lot of things that are compounding the denial because their bodies are acting as though they are not.
Sure.
And so anyways, I think education is forefront for me, and also, helping prevent this from happening, because one expert I spoke to told me that the best way to avoid this from happening is literally just having parents talk to their children to say, look, if you ever get pregnant, come to me, we'll deal with it.
Right.
Just knowing that there's an invitation there to like come to them and have a conversation. They're not going to be mad, that's a huge thing, because these girls aren't necessarily psychotic. They're just scared.
Yeah. Yeah. Of the many quotes in your film that were very affecting, one of the ones that just struck me comes toward the end, where Gail says, "This needed to happen." Mm-hmm. And this, I'm not going to speculate as to what the this was, but it felt to me like she felt like she was in service to a larger lesson, perhaps. And perhaps I'm reading into that.
No, I think that's accurate. I think this, to me, the way I took it was that what happened in 93 with the finding of this baby, that I should say was, she left in the woods, but animals found it, dragged it out to the road. So it was pretty, it was hard for people who found the baby. And I think for Gail, she understood that very deeply, that there were a lot of people that had been affected by that. And she didn't know that anybody had found this. Like Gail's a person who watches Hallmark movies and knits. Like, she doesn't watch the news. So she literally really put this out of her mind. And I think when she did get arrested, I think she really felt a lot of responsibility, and like that people needed to go through the process of the trial for their own sense of justice and healing. And, so that's kind of how I took it. She really, again, Gail is a person who does think about other people almost entirely. And every day on the way to the courthouse, she was praying for the judge, the prosecutors, her defense attorneys, anybody who'd seen the baby, the jury. Like, she had a whole list of prayers every day.
Yeah. Yeah, so. It's interesting. When you think of genres, your film, it's kind of an amalgam of several. There is a bit of the true crime, although it's markedly different from the true crime genre, because it's not sort of a TikTok, how did this happen? When did it happen? And then the big reveal. But it's a piece of psychology. It's a piece of sociology. And I feel like regardless of how you enter the film, you may not come out with nice, neat feelings wrapped up in a bow. There's a lot of ambiguity in the aftermath of watching your film. But isn't that the definition of thought-provoking documentary?
I'm so glad that's the end result for people. I just to me, the success for me at the end of this film, just as far as is that people really need to talk about it. I mean, I end up spending a lot of time afterwards talking to people. They talk to each other, and that's the way it should be. I think in a story like this, it's really hard to put a bow on it and try to have some kind of, because that's not life,
Right. Neat closure is seldom arrived at.
Yeah, there's no closure for something like this.
Yeah. Well, the film is Baby Doe, and I've been speaking with Jessica Earnshaw, the director. Jessica, thanks for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me.
There's a valley of sorrow in my soul, where every night I hear the thunder roll, like the sound of a distant gun, over all the damage I have done, and the shadows filling up this land are the ones I built with my own hands. There is no comfort from the cold of this valley of sorrow in my soul. There's a river of darkness in my blood. Through every vein I feel till the flood. I can find no bridge for me to cross, no way to bring back what is lost. Into the night it soon will sweep down where all my grievances I keep, but it won't wash away the years or one single hard and bitter tear. And the rock of ages I have known is a weariness down in the bone. Used to ride it like a rolling stone, now I just carry it alone. There's a highway rising from my dreams, deep in the heart I know it gleams, for I've seen it stretching wide, clear on across to the other side, beyond the river and the flood, and the valley where for so long I've stood, with the rock of ages in my bones. Someday I know